So, what do you think? What should be those initial strategies when you are building your team?
I actually usually ask four questions, right?
If you have two choices, either to be critical or optimistic, what should you do?
I do believe a lot of people will lose their jobs. I do believe a lot of people will not know what to do.
E is a constant which represents that this is the maximum possible growth that can happen.
If you don't understand the sales cycle, it's not going to work out.
What kind of tactic you as a founder would use to do a healthy go-to-market without raising much capital? Hey everyone, this is Utkarsh and welcome to Tribex, where we chat and deep dive with exceptional folks who have paved their own ways to be a leader in their community or space. Today I have somebody who has built one of the world's largest innovation or startup hub, T-Hub, or as we call it, Telangana Hub in Hyderabad, and now is leading Biome, a full-stack venture studio to support next-gen market-defining companies. He's also someone I reach out when I stuck or I need advice. So there's more to the introduction, but I still want to keep it reserved for the conversation and curiosity. I'm so excited for this conversation, and without further ado, I welcome Srinivas to Tribex. Welcome, Sri.
Thanks for having me, Utkarsh. Always great.
Can I call you Shri?
You can.
Thank you. Awesome. So I would like to start from where I think we met before, is when you were just coming out of T-Hub and was leading startup ventures at Cell, and now you have started this novel venture studio, Bio, right? So to kick off, I would like to begin. What's on your mind these days?
What's on my mind today? We're a startup that is building multiple other startups. That means that we have a lot of different things to think about. In fact, I'm thinking, where do I begin with this one? Honestly, there's a whole bunch of things, right? So we are building our own company, which includes, we've got an incredible team on board already, but we're hiring more people. How do we get them embedded into what we're doing here? Because a lot of what we do at a venture studio is very different to what the rest of the ecosystem is doing. That model is very, very different to what exists right now. And while it's fairly well known abroad, it's not known at all here. And so getting my team up to speed on this stuff, mindset shifts in terms of how we operate. And of course, I can go really deep into what the mindset shifts are. But also, working with some incredible founders to add value in the beginning, even before they become a portfolio company. As we assess them and help them craft their early adopter strategy, then bringing them on board. And then the couple of companies that we're already working on, just scaling them. So there's a lot that's keeping me busy right now.
Awesome. And I think it is one of the first venture studio on a massive scale that you are planning to launch or already launched this year. And I think last year we have begun operations.
That's right.
Yes. So I think very best wishes for that. And I can already see your website is buzzing with energy, and a lot of wonderful descriptions or wonderful things I saw on your website. And I'll come to that later, what some amazing stuff that I found out, which I would like to more in detail with you. But before that, maybe, let's go a little back, and I would like to know more about your T-Hub days, and maybe from there we'll begin the jump and try to find a way back to today and future. So maybe something about the initial spark that led you to start T-Hub, and not that stuff that we already spoken before. I want more on that. Maybe I know that you you were helping your father to kick off the venture, and then eventually Triple IT Hyderabad happened, and then T-Hub. But when you were starting T-Hub, right? What was on your mind? How it gonna turn out? What are few things that were turning out really good?
What I knew existed in those days, as you know, is that there were a lot of very, very smart, talented people who wanted to build startups to solve problems. But a lot of them didn't have a global outlook. The ecosystem to help them to scale didn't exist. The mentorship didn't exist. And so in the early days and of course, there were no organizations even to help them out. We had Thai, we had a couple of angel networks, but they just weren't deep enough mostly, right? Hands-on. And so the idea at first for T-Hub, we were a startup ourselves, Again, for most people, I'm sure they know that there was a book called Startup Communities that came out by a guy called Brad Felt. And he was the first guy to write about building an ecosystem from scratch by design. Unlike Silicon Valley or even Bangalore, how do you do that by design at scale? And so, first of all, it was just how do we build this community, get everybody who wants to help startups to scale into one building. Even the word ecosystem, as you know, that word is used a lot. But honestly, most people don't think about it in depth. They think of it almost as monolithic, like the startup ecosystem. But what that is it's truly like an ecosystem in nature, which is there are multiple players involved. All of them are playing their own games. For example, what a corporate wants out of a startup is very different from what an investor wants out of a startup, which is very different from what the government wants. And so it's understanding all those pieces, getting them to talk to each other and helping each of them win the games they're winning. And so in the beginning, it was just that. How do we just pull all of these people together and help startups at the heart of it all, not lose focus on helping founders build their startups? We went from being a scrappy startup that was figuring out what it was doing to a large organization within the first 4 years. The team was great. Our corporate innovation division was thriving. Our incubator division was thriving. Our go-to-market access and international market access was thriving. My job essentially became tour guide. So I was any CEO, politician, bureaucrat that came to Hyderabad, you had to show them around Tia. And that's not what I signed up for, right?
Correct.
While it's important, I felt like I wanted to do more. I wanted to help build companies, help founders to scale, which was my original motivation. I dabbled in investment and family office to see on that side, but I really fell in love with the venture studio model. The venture studio model essentially says that every founder could use help to build a company. They're standard building blocks. If you can get best practices to come into the company and get great resources across research, design, product, sales, and of course the stuff that most founders don't want to do, legal, finance, accounting, and fundraising, you can increase the likelihood of success. So that's the journey I've been on.
So how do you think all of this comes together, and how does it add unique advantages to startups that a venture studio supports, and how Biome is positioned?
I think the first thing that you need to understand is that a venture studio is a very expensive model. It's not a cheap model. And unfortunately, a lot of people think it's an easy way to get extra equity in a company, right?
Correct.
You have to define what is the outcome that you're looking for, and how will you drive that outcome. In our case, for example, Biome is a company that wants to build venture scalable companies, right? It's not the only model. There are venture studios that exist that want to build cash flow positive businesses. Very different mindset, very different building skill set, right? In our case, though, if we want to build, I will use us as an example of how this works, and also the difficulty of the model. If you want to build venture scalable companies, then you need two things. You need obviously a large problem that needs a solution, or a new way of looking at a large problem. You also need a great founder to work with you. At the end of the day, it's going to be a company that will spin out. The founders are the ones that will drive that in the long run, while the studio drives it in the short run and continues to be invested throughout, right? If I say I want great founders to come to me, a lot of those great founders could build a company on their own. They're only going to come to you if you can do better than they can, which means that my core team has to be amazing at what they do as well. That's the pick we give to a founder is you don't have to build that team. We're already there. And because we are working across multiple companies, our individual knowledge, because we work with multiple companies, and our collective knowledge as a team is much stronger than an individual set of people who come together for the first time. So that's one, is that we have to have great people. It's an expensive model. We have to have the ability to raise that capital ourselves. So that's the first thing. Second thing is to raise that capital, our investors, we now have to talk to them about the venture studio model and how that is different from being an LP in a fund. Almost all of our investors have invested into funds as well. Very, very different risk return ratio. We believe our IRR is going to be higher than most VCs, but it's an unproven model in India. And so you need people who understand you, understand your team, understand the long picture, and bet on that. And that's what we've been able to do.
Nice.
If I think another thing to focus on is, what are the sort of folks that come to us to work with a studio like ours, right? We have broadly three personas. On one side, we have very, very strong tech founders, deep tech folks, AI folks, people who built some form of IP or are brilliant at technology, don't really enjoy the building a company piece of it, don't understand that part, and don't want to do it, ideally speaking. This is one type. The second type is the corporate folks. So we get a lot of people who are very, very senior in their industry, thought leaders even, spotted an opportunity, right? They know that an area of their industry is ripe for disruption. But again, they don't want to build alone. And so we wrap the studio around them and tell them, you don't need to bother about the hiring. You don't need to bother about the fundraising. We will help you with the business model. We'll help you with the first customer, all of those pieces. And the third category of founder that comes to us are the serial entrepreneurs, the repeat founders, who again know that they could do it themselves, but just want to get off the ground fast. And we bring that team to them immediately to get going and build at speed. We also infuse capital, but we start with the conversation that capital is not the primary reason to come to us. In fact, if it is, you're not a good fit for us. First, we see, do we have conviction in what you're building? And we'll help to narrow that down and solidify the business model. And only then do we figure out how much money do we need to get to the next round, or the next milestone, rather. We put in our capital, and that's when things get going as a portfolio.
Got it. I think it's still a very novel model in India. And I think the kind of positioning that you are doing is also very novel, where you're working with repeat founders, serial founders, corporate folks, tech founders. Those kind of venture studios I rarely see who have that sort of focus. And also all venture studios are very different from each other because they, as you said, the venture studio is a startup in itself. It inherently is a startup, functions like a startup. Yet you have a high human capital that works with you, and as the term that you use is battle proven team to back these next gen companies. So I think it's a very, very tough. Yet I think since you are very good with spotting trends, so maybe I think India is ready, and I would like a comments more on that. But I'd like to come on around a very similar similar mind frame that you are using is you have been at the forefront of identifying and nurturing new ventures, right? And this is sort of a category creation in market where whatever you have done, made BT Hub, made now a venture studio like this, it's in itself a category creation in India, right? It's a new novel concept, right? So what kind of mental models or frameworks do you employ to spot these emerging trends? Be it, creating your institutions, the kind of institutions you have been creating, or be it spotting institutions that you can support or founders you can support.
I think one of the things, by the way, I apply startup principles to pretty much everything in my life. And so one of the things I talk about with all startups is that you need focus, first of all. You need to identify a large problem worth solving, and then focus on that, right? And don't worry if it's not been done very well. Go back to first principles thinking. I'm a very, very big believer in first principles thinking. Break things down to their, first of all, identify, what is the problem, and then do the root cause analysis and get down to absolute first principles. A lot of people tend to take what already exists and try and modify that. That's one. The other part of it is, obviously that goes hand in hand with it is the whole Pareto principle, the 80-20. Focus on the things that deliver big outsized results and don't get diverted by the trivial smaller things. Again, I think a lot of people get into the busy work rather than that. I've always loved to tackle challenges that not many people have taken on yet. And yet clearly its time has come. In fact, I think another principle, when we're asking questions of founders, I actually usually ask 4 questions, right? The first 3 are, they're all obvious questions, but they're very, very deep.
Correct.
What problem are you solving? Who are you solving it for? Why you? And why now? And that why now question, I think a lot of people miss. If you look at T-Hub, I think its time had come. It's not that I did anything incredibly special. It's just it was the right time for all of those pieces to come together. I believe that's the same point in time for venture studios. They're taking off around the world, and I believe they're going to take off in India. I'm getting a lot of people coming to me and say, how do we build a venture studio for our specific industry, for example? And it's for those same reasons. Capital exists today. Great founders and large problems exist. But, one of the things that I believe, which is kind of counter to the venture capital model, is I don't believe in the single superhero founder, right? There's this myth of the superhero founder, like the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musks of the world do, or even the, Steve Jobs. The one guy with the magnetic personality who will just, by sheer force of personality, make the company work, right? I think that's what most ecosystem players back are these founders who will take them all the way. And, they say they will help. What that means typically, though, is give them some advice, open a couple of doors, give them some capital, give them some space. But really, it's up to the founder. Whereas I believe, there's an analogy that another studio founder globally, who was one of the leading thinkers in this space then, which is most of those guys are searching for Superman. We're building Iron Man. Right? We understand what it takes to build a great company. By the way, that guy was a guy called Alper Salen, who runs a studio out of Dubai. I think that our skills wrapped around these people can build outside success. And I think that time is now, right? To your point, you kind of mentioned this earlier, which is kind of what's changed in the ecosystem.
Correct.
When I started this journey, like I said, we had a lot of founders who hadn't really been exposed to the world, weren't thinking global models, weren't very sophisticated, to be blunt. That's changed. We have a whole bunch of folks who've come back from different countries with global experience. They have ambition that's large, right? Capital exists to back them, but they need support in building out faster, better, stronger. These are the broad ones, right? And there's also, again, there's something called the barbell strategy, which is very, very similar. It's basically place concentrated bets on a few things. Don't scatter it across different pieces. But this is all early, when you're ideating. I think when you're building, there's a few other principles. For example, the biggest one, just customer obsession and jobs to be done, right? Focus deeply on understanding the problem, then figure out what do I need to solve for that specific target demographic. What job is that customer wanting to do with us? Again, what I find most of the time is a lot of founders are focused on a product or a solution, and they're pushing that instead of the other way around. Instead of being obsessed with the customer and saying, what does the customer want? So I think that's a very important one when you're building. And another one I believe is, you might have heard of the North Star principle, the North Star frameworks, where people pick a single piece. And that's great, right? I think that's absolutely critical. But I believe in countermetrics as well. Oftentimes, again, what I see is founders will quote vanity metrics at you that are not really the most important pieces. And so being able to have a clear target metric, but also a counter metric to make sure that you're not sacrificing balance and building the company as well is very, very important too.
So I think quite agree to that. And since you have spoken about this, I would like to come to this question or to this area where I was going through Biome, as I was saying earlier. Is you yourself, apart from leading Biome, you yourself have allocated a role to you, which I found to be a go-to-market or a BD and a PM expert at Biome. And I would like to know, I was so fascinated by it that every member in Biome has a defined role, or as you have called, axes, right? And I think there are 6 axes as such, which is there, right? So I would like to know your thought behind it, and how did you came about it, and as part your role is considered, how do you define go to market and business development?
In a way, for example, I'll tell you how we think about what companies to work with, or what founders to work with, I should say, right? We typically, let's say you came to me with an idea. What I'm looking at is 2 things. I'm looking at the idea you brought to me separately, and I'm looking at you as a founder separately, right? On the idea piece, in the beginning, obviously, we apply some of the typical things that everybody in this world looks at, which is, how big is this market? Is it a growing market? How deep is the need? How clearly defined is the target audience? All that kind of stuff, right? But that's not enough. What we're also looking at is, what are the pillars on which we could build a differentiated company? Because any problem that you bring to me, there are already solutions out there. If there's not, there's a problem again, right? So we have to have some form of moat that we want to build on in the long run. It might not exist fully yet, but we have the seeds of it right now. And an example of some of those moats are, obviously, if they're tech founders, then some form of IP, or the ability to build differentiated tech. Another one could just be unfair access to market, right? A thought leader in industry has credibility with every buyer in their industry, is an unfair piece, right? But another one that we look for is there some non-obvious insight that this founder is bringing to us, or counterintuitive viewpoint of the world, because they have deep knowledge of a space, right? Like, the whole market is going in this direction. All startups are looking at this, but I think we should go in this direction. And so we assess all of these things. We don't just take it for granted, but we assess alongside, and we see, can we broaden this piece into a solid business model?
Got it. I think these are first principles of GTM. Normally, when folks, or I have seen a lot of people talking about GTM, they think about market first. But I think talking about the idea and the team or the founder itself is also very important. And so
somewhere, I think, comes from the stage, right? So we're starting very, very early. We're starting at the idea stage typically, and so you can't say GTM yet because you don't have a team, you don't have a product yet. In these cases, and yes, a lot of them will push for revenue very quickly because they're a startup. We tell them no. Again, one of the principles that I push out to all founders that I talk to, regardless of whether with Biome or not, is, in your first phase, optimize for learning, not for revenue. You have a bunch of hypotheses around which you are building this company. Have you clearly articulated those hypotheses? Can you build a first product that is testing and validating those, and you're learning from that to build what the customer wants again? And it's all informed by customer, going back to customer obsession. Only after all of this happens, and you validate a bunch of hypotheses, and now you're clear that this product has seen at least problem-solution fit, only then do you start focusing on GTM true.
So I think we have covered the international part of it. Now I want to come back to India. I want to understand if consider I'm a founder and I want to build a product in a very niche market. Let's say consumer market, which is largely Indian focused. I want to do a beachwear brand, for couples and for especially for women, because they look out for the very less beachwear brands in India. What would be your advice in terms of, it's a very non-obvious question. It is just, fun in whatever you feel like. It's nothing, written or, professional it has to be. Whatever you feel like, it has to be a go-to-market strategy. What do you think, right? What kind of tactics, you as a founder would use, to do a go-to-market, to do a healthy go-to-market without raising much capital in, like first 90 days or as you call it, first 100 days.
Sure. So again, with the caveat that I'm not a B2C guy typically, but again, if you're just to look at some first principle answers and how we operate at Biome, what I would say is this. First of all, you need to validate that this is a genuine market that, people have that need. You don't go by the 5 friends you have or your family, which again, a lot of them do, right? Find a target audience. I think start with the fact that, first of all, validate that this is a problem. Hopefully it's a big problem. One of the things I tell startups, and we're specifically talking about the model for scalable startups right now, not a lifestyle business that will earn you, a few lakhs or even a couple of crores, right? We're talking about building something at scale.
Correct.
So find out it's a big problem. Secondly, go after one niche within that large demographic that is your early adopter. The guys, the people in that industry, the women in this case, who really want this. Figure out where they hang out, figure out how to communicate with them, talk to them, try and sell them on the concept first. One typical model, for example, if you're going to be selling over the internet, is build a landing page. Use a little bit of capital to promote it online and see how many people even sign up for, updates on this for when it's coming out. Don't get fooled by your own obsession with, something. This is a business, not a hobby. So go find where they sit, go talk to a bunch of them, try and sell a few of them immediately. Another principle in the early days is, we always talk about scale, but in the early days, you do things that don't scale. Go have those direct conversations with as many of them as you can. So you really know, is this working for them or not? Like the Airbnb guys did, right? Go visit the rooms that they initially were trying to do. So these are some fundamental pieces of advice for early days.
Now, coming back to the thing that we're discussing is about ecosystem is being a such widely used word and very less understood holistically, right? So I remember my days I was working with Chhattisgarh government. I was doing my own startup, and then I was running my own startup actually, and was also working alongside government to establish their first incubator, doing the first conference, expo, and all of those things. And I think it's very hard to build an ecosystem because you cannot copy paste, right? Your learnings. You're referring a book, right? Because these guys who built ecosystem at, I think in apart from Bay Area in US, I don't remember the place. What
Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah. So I think building something of that sort in Hyderabad or maybe in some other place in India may not be geography restricted, but maybe domain specific. For example, government these days is trying to build something around deep tech. Can India build a deep tech ecosystem? Let's say for founders who want to do semiconductor or founders who want to build hardware startups, right? It's every time very, very hard. And I have seen a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my seniors who are at the ministry struggle, with the experiments, and they feel like, where would we land in like 3 years, 4 years, right? And normally the analogy starts with comparing the ecosystem, the kind of ecosystem that they are building in India, for example, in deep tech, to the ecosystem in US, UK, China. So what do you think? Should we compare? How should we go about? First question is that. How should we, if we want to build something in deep tech, how should we compare ourselves from the practices that is happening around the world? And then how should we actually build one? What do you think
What you don't want to be doing is doing something just because somebody else is doing something. You do something because you believe there's a large problem that needs to be solved, and you believe you have a good shot at solving that problem. And you start from there. So the reason to do a deep tech ecosystem, for example, is not because everybody else is doing a deep tech ecosystem. It's because there's a fundamental place in the world for companies using deep tech to solve real problems and scale those. And it's capital intensive. Maybe it's difficult, we'll help them to do that. So forget competition, forget what everybody else is doing for a minute. Just look at, is there an opportunity here to build something that will change the world in some form? Then you look at who are the stakeholders that would be interested in this, right? One of the things I think is really important is the storytelling aspect of building ecosystems. There has to be a story behind what are you building and why are you building it. You're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. If you have a vision of what the world would become if you built this ecosystem out, spin that into a story and tell that to every stakeholder out there, inspire them to be a part of this, right? And like I said, figure out what each of them wants from these pieces. It has to be some government intervention, some corporates, some incubators, accelerators, maybe investors for sure, and obviously a bunch of startups together. Don't try and do everything at one shot as well. To that nail it, then scale it piece. Focus on a few specific things within that area that you're going to be really, really good at. Of course, I think one thing I have to state is a lot of this conversation that we're having will depend on which stakeholder is building this out. If the government is building this out, for example, they need scale. There's no point in them doing it if it's 20 startups, right? Whereas if you're building something from the mindset of helping a bunch of deep tech founders to build at scale, maybe it's a slightly different approach. So one thing that you kind of alluded to, which is absolutely true, is it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. You have to understand who is asking this question, who wants to build it out, what resources do you have at your disposal, then do a competitive landscape as to what exists already, and how do we help build this out. So one of the biggest things that I see in ecosystems typically, if I generalize, is a lot of them are backed by government, as you said. Government wants to build infrastructure because it's what they're good at, but ecosystems aren't built with just infrastructure. It's built by people. And so can you bring in the right set of people who are inspired by this? Which again means, by the way, that you need to be able to incentivize them to work with you. You can't just pay them government salaries. It's not going to happen. Get all of these folks together. So yeah, be very, very clear about what success means in this area. Define a few short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals, and then clearly create focused, targeted programs to deliver those outputs. You have to balance some quick success to keep that story, that you create of what the difference is. You've got to create the quick wins to get people excited while building towards the long term. And again, sometimes people just focus on long term and people lose interest because there's no short term wins. And vice versa, they focus on short term and it fizzles out in the long term. So you got to match those two things together, the horizons.
Shri, I want to ask from the perspective of incubators and accelerators, because there are a lot of schemes from the government where funds are being allocated in Tier 2, Tier 3, and they have the mandate to support Tier 2, Tier 3 specifically. How should they go about? How should they make their programs more effective?
So there are incubators in Tier 2, Tier 3 already, right? Tier 2 at least, maybe not Tier 3, but Tier 2 already there are incubators. I think first of all, incubators need to have built out a solid local community and local support for startups in their region. I don't think a lot of them do that as well as they could be doing that, because at the end of the day, again, see, an incubator by definition is an organization that works with multiple companies. Because they're working with multiple companies, that gives them access to people, organizations that an individual startup may not have access to. And of course, with their government connections as well, possibly there as well. So more capital than an individual founder could get potentially in the beginning, early days I'm talking.
Correct.
More customers than in the beginning. The incubator has to, first of all, be a place where all startups come for advice, if not space, right? But again, going back to my principle of building up Biome and the venture studio, the incubator needs to have people on its team who can actually help startups. So that's principle number one. You've got to have a team that can actually help startups. It can't be some professor who's doing this part-time.
Correct.
Right?
Unfortunately, that's a practice that has been.
It is. And it's not going to work in that case, right? So principle number one is figure out what team you need to run programs and partnerships and access for these startups in your local area. 2, have a calendar of events that engages startups in your area and call all these partners that your startups may want. The next piece is understand what your startups need. So if you have a prop tech company in your incubator and you're not good at it, who in your network could be good at it? As an incubator, again, you've got access to other incubators in the country. Maybe you connect them to somebody else. But the primary principle that they have to operate from is I need to help my startups to succeed, and I will do whatever it takes to get them there. Right? Not just, I've got an incubator, I've got a space, I've got a few startups in my space, I'm happy. But everything needs to be solved problems for my customers. And for incubators, my customers are my startups.
Correct.
Right? So build that thriving local community, connect to other incubators in spaces you're not good at, so that you can, pass through your startups to those folks, and figure out your network of customers and investors that you can bring to bear for your startups. That happens whether you're a tier 2, tier 3 or not. It just is more relevant in a smaller town because it's that much harder for that startup on his own.
And Shri, I think these are first principles for you, but normally a lot of incubators I've seen fall on that because contrary to that, they see that they should provide access to a larger community, the community based in, because tier 2, tier 3 founders, one network of metros, and that's what these incubators focus upon, which is absolutely, I think, a contrary approach to focus upon a local community, which can be more helpful. And I totally agree with that. And I think events, people take it very lightly, or they do it in a very less planned way, or in a very casual way, but it can be very, very strategic as well in terms of empowering startups.
Having worked with a lot of incubators, as well, I can also say the flip side of it, which is that there are a lot of very, very passionate folks trying to run these incubators, right? Unfortunately, it starts with, is the money available for them to build teams or whatever? And also the person running the incubator, do they have entrepreneurial experience themselves? Oftentimes they don't, because the amount of money that's available to pay that person is low. So anybody worth their salt is not going to come there, right?
Correct.
We had that problem with T-Hub in the beginning. And of course, we created a system where we could go beyond a certain scale. And that's what made the difference for us. But then at Triple IT, for example, when I ran that incubator and I saw firsthand the problems that you face as an incubator manager, you don't have the budgets. But that should not be a reason to stop doing this. In that case, what we did was we built, I pulled in my network of folks. There are enough people out there in the ecosystem that want to do this free just to help out. So pull them in. And secondly, have founders help founders pull in, founders who are successful into the system. So it's hard. It's not an easy task. I don't want to put down incubator managers. I know the difficult job they have.
Yes.
But yeah, absolutely you have to focus on outcomes, and you need to do the hard thing to create those outcomes for your startups.
What should be, a founder's perspective on building connections when they are building their first team? What kind of folk should they meet? What kind of people should they hire? What kind of questions? I know you will go down to the first principles, but yes, maybe some stories or some one or two good questions or something that comes to your mind, which can get them a head start in terms of when they're building their team initially. I'll come to the community piece, community as a mode as well, but maybe let's start with building a team, any founder who's going to getting started. Because I saw that that as a trend is when founders apply for grants. I found a very big gap there because normally a lot of founders spend a lot of time applying for grants or raising capital themselves. A piece of advice that I felt and which I gave to our founders, which really helped them out is, why not you hire an intern or a resource who you train them to present your idea to raising grants. Because any case, your storytelling or as a founder doesn't matter much. It's about your fitment to the grant. So finding the right match, you can maybe hire or train a resource. And that has helped a lot of founders because they struggle a lot. They spend a lot of time in, writing the applications and then doing the, IC meet, and then so it is a lot of hustle, right? So what do you think, what should be those initial strategies when you are building your team? Consider I am a non-tech founder and I want to build something from a tier 2, tier 3 city. Yeah, and how should I go about it? How should I make my team?
So, couple of things. One is, we talked about the power of storytelling. First of all, it is critical to build a great team, right? Your team is your biggest strength when you're building out a company, along with your customer obsession.
Correct.
You need to be able to attract great people to your team. Now, if they're great, they've got options. Why are they going to join this new startup where everything is uncertain, funding has not been procured probably or not enough, etc.? As a founder, you need, this is one thing I say to all of them, founders, you all need to be salespeople and you're selling all the time. Part of your selling is not just to customers, it's to your potential team. How do you sell them on the vision that you have? How do you make them see how the world will transform if they're a part of it? That's the way to attract the best people to join you, is they're on a mission alongside you, right? And so first, create that vision, sell that vision, so that every person you hire needs to be mission driven, not just doing it for the salary. Secondly, you have to be crystal clear about what skill sets you require from each role, right? Dive deep. Don't just get a developer. Get somebody who's specific for the piece you want. So spend that time on really doing that. And wherever possible, try and figure out how do you make sure that you're validating this guy is good, or this woman even is good at what they're supposed to be doing. Don't just hire them quickly because they're cheap or they're quick to join. I think a lot of this stuff, of course, is fairly standard, but I think the critical part is that first one. You have to have a powerful vision that inspires people to join your team. I think that's the differentiator.
As I was telling you before we start this conversation, is just one simple mail, rejection mail that I was doing. And I found a founder writing back to me that why not you also give some valuable advice or resource also with the rejection mail. And I thought, why not do that? Actually, that's a very good suggestion. Instead of me being offended, by the founder, it's a very valid point in itself. And it happened. Now we have like 250 plus founders. And talking to these founders, I find time around a week or in a 15 days when I open the chat where all the founders talk to each other, I talk to them, is they struggle a lot around finding the right capital or getting the access to the capital early on or later on. And this is true for all the stage of founders, be it early stage founders, be it late stage founders. And a lot of my seniors, my alma mater, they also share a very similar story where they find, where they spend a considerable amount of time talking to people that they should not have talked to. And I think, of course, Biome is positioned in that way. But as an advice, what do you think? How should founders navigate the VC landscape? Because as I see, I was reading an insight by Venture Intelligence, is there are only 30 to 40 mature VC firms as of now in India who have, or I think 40 to 50 would be the correct number, who have done fund 2 or more. So there are only 40, 50 VC firms that can provide you that scale, right? Where they have the community, they have successful founders, successful LPs backing them. They are raising more funds to support. They can do a top up in the next round. Rest are normally one transaction relationship where there is an angel or there is a new fund or micro VC fund that is there. How do you think founders should navigate that? Maybe you can take an example at your convenience of a late stage founder, whatever you like.
So again, I think, are we talking Series A? Are we talking Series B? It depends on the stage also that they're at, right? And the scale that they've reached.
Let's consider they have raised an angel fund. They are doing good revenues. They might not have found a product market fit. They might think that they have achieved product market. They're doing well. They have customers. They are selling to them. But they need that one strategic investor who can be the right fit. How should they go about it?
I'm going to say something that's going to sound really obvious, but I've seen too many founders make this mistake, right? Which is, do your research on the funds themselves. What's their thesis? What sort of companies have they invested in already? Have they invested in any companies in your industry? If they've invested in something that's your competition, then you're wasting your time going after that fund, right? In fact, they may grill you, to your point of wasting time. They may get one of their analysts to grill you just so they can learn what you're doing and pass that back to their portfolio. So do your research. Don't go to companies that either already have funded your competition or just don't care about that thesis. There are some funds that's not their area, so don't waste your time on those guys. That's fundamental principle number one. Number two, try and study, if you can, what they look for when they're investing into startups. Try and get access to other startups that have raised money from them and understand, how do they think? What do they look for? Can you tailor your pitch to what they, how they operate? Again, basically do your homework. All of this is about knowing your investor before you get them on board. Another piece is, potentially, do you even need a VC right now? Can you get a strategic investor from somewhere else on board? Either a family office that has interest in that space, or a large, again, this is rare, but I'm just saying it's out there, a large player in your space that may want to put money into this as well. There is no easy way to do this. Perseverance is absolutely critical. Again, one thing that I see people do is they go do a few pitches, they get negative responses, or they waste a bunch of time. They start getting cynical, and that starts showing up in their next VC conversations. It's sad, but it's true. Sometimes they only, torpedo their own thing because they've got negativity built in already.
Correct.
Instead of that, listen carefully to the questions. A no is not a no. A no is usually a no right now, right?
Correct.
And again, I think a lot of founders miss that point. What the VC fund is saying is, for various reasons, it could be the stage of their fund right now. It could be that, they want to see a little more traction. They're going to say no. What your job is to do as the founder is understand, why is it a no and what would it take to make it a yes? And go do that. This is a very transactional industry. As you know, people who said no, 2 years ago could come back and be your next big investor. So don't take a no as a no. It's a no right now. Persevere, keep going. I think that's the only advice that I have for this.
I also thought of a model and I wrote a piece on that. A lot of founders reflected back, is I made a matrix, an X and Y matrix, where X-axis is high pressure and Y-axis is high chances, right? So basically there are 4 quadrants. First is high pressure, high chances. For example, angels, debt funds, or corporate funds. There's a lot of pressure, but the chances are also high. Raising an angel fund is, very easy. You can, filter out 100 people who have built companies in those areas and reach out to them. And it's not that difficult, right? But the pressure is also high because angel is an individual investor. He would walk down every day. What is happening with my money and all of this. And then when you go down to high chances but low pressure is where government grants skate, right? But again, with high chances and low pressure, there is a problem of a lot of reporting. There are a lot of people that are there. You need to you have to you are filtered out as well. Angel networks also fall under this spot. So I thought of this model. Maybe this could simplify. And I think because things that are very ambiguous or very contextual need some simplification, some mental model to help simplify or demystify their questions or the thought, various thoughts around it. Because founders get very chaotic or they don't get away when they think about it. And these are all sort of founders. Any insight from your side on that? Founders raising funds and they were able to think through and then change their way and came out successful. So I think we are done with the serious stuff. We are heading to the fun side of the conversation. And so I would like to start with that question is, what do you read or found recently that still, amazes you? Or you read in whatever frame of time you read, you think like, wow, this is how life is, or this is how, business is, or whatever.
You said it's on a lighter note, so I'm going to say this as a joke, and I am saying it in purpose. But everything going on with Donald Trump right now is just unbelievable. Like, wow, this is what life is. How is this possible? Like, how is this stuff happening in the world? How are people able to sit back and just let it happen? So many things on that note, but that's on a humorous note.
It's okay.
That stuff is seriously shocking to me. What else? I think, again, I'm not sure in what context you asked the question, but...
And there is no context to it.
Okay.
Context is over. We are over with context.
I think another thing that hit me recently, which, is, I've had this realization before, but it's, again, is how quickly technology and technological innovation goes from being magic to being run-of-the-mill and criticized, right? I'm talking specifically, the AI chat GPTs of the world, right? Claudes and all that. It was like, oh my God, I can type something in and get an answer, and it's giving me these reasonable answers. That was a year ago. Now we're like, oh my God, chat GPT sucks. It's so bad. Its answers are terrible. You've forgotten the magic already. That's something I was thinking about.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I found, I was rereading my older textbooks. So I'm a science student, so I love reading about, and physics amazed me back then. And I was reading some of the concepts, and I found that in physics and in maths, both places, there are two natural constants, pi and e. And it amazed me, kind of, but they are natural constants. They are not, they didn't came out of any equation or something of that sort. They're there in the nature. So there is an experiment that is there. So if you draw horizontal lines on a piece of paper and you drop a pen, right? The chances of that pen falling out of the line is 2 by pi. If you drop the pen 1 crore times, it will come out to be this. And what is E? If you try to find out E is a constant which represents that this is the maximum possible growth that can happen. That's why it's called exponential. Nothing is beyond that. And it has a number attached to it, which is, I think, 2.3 something, right? So a growth cannot happen more than that in a frame of time.
Yeah, there are all these things that happen in nature that seem to be miraculous structures of organization, right? The Fibonacci sequence is another one, for example. It's easy, that whole thing, right? How that plays out. So
Correct.
nature is a lot more complex than we give it credit for.
So coming on to the rapid fire, it doesn't have any context. Whatever comes to your mind, the first word or first few sentences, you need to just say that.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm getting started. One word to describe Indian startup ecosystem as of
Maturing.
the most underrated skill of an ecosystem builder.
Structure.
Okay, and what do you mean by it?
Unfortunately, what I see for a lot of ecosystem builders, and I've obviously talked to hundreds, is that they think that their ability to talk to people is their biggest strength. It's like anybody can talk to people. Can you structure that in a way that makes sense? And you're able to access all those different parts of that ecosystem when required in the best ways possible.
Correct. Very valid. Okay, next one. Biggest misconception about venture studios.
They take too much equity.
So that's a very valid point. If not venture building,
Good ones don't.
correct. Good ones take the equity with the right people. That's how they are able to create.
That's right.
If not venture building, what else?
If not venture building, coaching.
Okay.
Coaching people to their potential, I thought. That's something I've always
Soft
enjoyed.
source. Oh, nice. Finding the potential, something around that.
Yeah. Just helping people figure out their life's purpose and how to achieve that.
Oh, nice. That's beautiful. So I would expect something around that after Biome, maybe. After what? Hope you're never done with Biome, but of course.
Yeah. I hope not. This is the last thing that I'm going to be doing, I think.
Correct. I really wish. Last question is, what's one trend that you are excited about?
One trend.
Anything.
I think it's a cliched answer, but I really do think it's AI.
Good.
Yeah. I think the potential, again, I'm not talking about Gen AI as it stands today, but just a whole bunch of stuff that's coming up and what's possible because of it. I'm definitely somebody that thinks the potential is huge. I'm not a naysayer. I know there's a lot of doomsday AI folks.
Correct.
But no, I think the potential to use it to make the world a better place. There's a lot of work to be done to make that happen, but I think it's possible.
Yes, I think that's valid. And I recently read about if you have just two choices, either to be critical or optimistic, what should you do? And the answer was optimistic, because things around you is growing. Things are always changing, scientifically also, logically, and also otherwise. So you should definitely look forward to the change. And change is always positive, right?
Yeah.
It's part of the nature. So I agree to that. And I guess we have come to an end, although not end, and maybe more conversation sparks from here further on. And we have more such discussions, and I'll be able to put this into good structure so that people are able to get good points from our insights. I'll definitely try my best. And on that note, any final thoughts from your side?
One, something you're really passionate about, and two, it is something that can change the world. And if you're going to spend your time, spend it wisely. And so make sure that it's a big prop. The other is just a comment on the world as it stands today. And that is that while I said I'm a techno-optimist, I have no freaking idea what the world is going to look like in 20 years. Forget beyond that. With all the advances in robotics, AI, healthcare, just across the board, right? And 50 years, just absolutely no clue what the world is going to be like, if it will be there or not, all those sort of questions. It's just, we're at an incredibly pivotal moment in history. It's super exciting. It's also super scary, but I love it. I'm here for it.
Thank you so much, Lee, for being on Tribex. Love this conversation and see you soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Utkarsh.